Friday Night Racing
on Off the Ball.
Brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. Visit hri.ie.
And you are welcome along to Friday Night Racing, brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Visit hri.ie, love every racing moment, or follow the new Twitter account at HRI Racing, hashtag every racing moment. It has been a month of records, of firsts. Willie Mullins was the first trainer to have 10 winners at the Cheltenham Festival. And Willie, somehow you've managed to avoid being on this show all these years until now. This is your first time on the show.
Yeah, I think I got duped into this.
At least you're honest anyway.
Barbara White caught me at a moment yesterday, obviously, yeah.
How have you been since Cheltenham? Is the obvious question to ask.
Probably not very good.
Right.
I had a quiet Saturday night, and then I got my arm twisted on Sunday night to go out for a drink, and it's sort of good fun since that, yeah.
Well, life is to be lived and these things are to be enjoyed. You had a hell of a week. How was it in terms of your expectations? I mean, it wasn't the first Cheltenham you had where it ended up being a great week, but it started off pretty slowly.
Yeah, we're just trying to go through that. I haven't really gone through it yet, but possibly we hadn't the firepower on the first day. I was a bit disappointed after the first day. It was great to get Statler to win, but I thought a lot of the others ran dead. But then chatting to people, our own team and that, and we're probably saying, maybe we just hadn't horses good enough to win. They were good enough to run well, but not good enough to win. So maybe we got, as much as we deserved on the first day.
Yeah, a lot of people have been in touch with me for questions to ask you in relation to horses, in relation to Cheltenham, and we will get to that after we have a bit of a chat about your career so far. But just briefly on Cheltenham, your son Patrick had 3 winners. You had your 10 winners, but I guess rightly, Rachel Blackmore hogged most of the headlines for racing.
Yeah, I mean, Rachel and Henry won the feature races. That was a huge achievement. That was the whole training achievement and riding for achievement all on their own, without ever anything we did. And that shouldn't be passed up either. And I don't think it is. I think the racing public and the general public acknowledge that it's what both of them did, winning the Champion Hurdle and the Gold Cup. Absolute fantastic achievement.
I think you've Prince Charles's Mrs. Camilla calling to the yard yesterday as well to see the horses. And how could you describe what Rachel has done for racing over the last 13 months?
Absolutely phenomenal. To win the Grand National and then come back and win the Gold Cup, backed up by 2 Champion Hurdles. If any jockey did it, Ruby, Tony McCoy, they would hail it as a huge part of their career, and here Rachel does it as one would say, a slip of a girl. She's very light. She's not a big, strong man. Physically, she just doesn't have the strength of either of those 2 riders, and but she brings a different energy to her horses.
What is that, do you think?
I think balance. I think trust. I see a lot of the girls, they ride like that. Look at Jodie riding for us in bumpers.
It's one of the best strike rates in Ireland.
Yeah, and I put her on horses. Take Vita de Vito or Chris Jones' horse that won in Tremor. Its previous run had been in Puntertown with Derek O'Connor, one of the strongest jockeys in the weighroom, and it ran clean away with Derek in Punchestown in his previous race, and Jodie rode it around Tremor, like an ordinary horse, settled it in 4th or 5th and came through and won at the end. So you see, it's not all about brute strength. It's Jodie plays with the horses. She lets the horse think that it's the boss and it can settle, and she doesn't fight because she hasn't the physical strength to fight it. And so she plays, and that's how you hold a horse. I mean, a horse is always stronger than any jockey, and I always marvel at how horses never use anything like their full strength against human beings. They're domesticated animals, for the want of a better word, and they actually mind us all the time. And I remember once bringing a horse up to the vet it broke its pastern, which is like your wrist, in a race in Goran, and we loaded up, we bandaged it up as best we could, loaded up into the box, myself and the owner's son, and he was a big guy, he was about 11 stone at the time, riding. I rode the horse in the race, and I trained this way, and we brought it up to Ned Goings in the Curragh. And we got to about Crookstown. She fell down because she was on 3 legs. And the two of us then just, jumped on top of her, jumped on her head and her neck to keep her down. We had about 20 miles to go. So we'll keep her down and then let her up and unload her. And she put up with that for about 30 seconds. And then she just threw the two of us off like we were two flies. And I just thought, wow, this is a little mare. She was barely 16 hands. And she got up and stood up in the box on 3 legs. I said, the strength they have, they never use half the strength they have against the guys that ride them or lead them or anything. They're, when you're working with horses long enough, you realise how strong they are. But, and that's going back to lady riders. I think also of Holly Doyle's ride in Saudi Arabia last year on True Self, and the way she manoeuvred the horse around the track. There was 1 or 2 instances where she was cut off in the race by other jockeys, and she didn't fight for her position. She pulled back and waited and put it all into one effort and won the race. And I think the head cam is on YouTube with the American lady jockey doing the commentary on it, and it's fascinating to watch. And I think that's where girls win over their male counterparts. There isn't as much testosterone going on between their ears, and I think the horse senses that. And she could have won that battle to fight for her position, but she didn't. She held back and used all her effort at the business end of the race. And that's where I think lady jockeys win over.
Fascinating stuff. I've often said that myself. It might sound sexist, but I think some female riders just get a tune out of horses that males just don't. And I guess yourself as well, the value of the yard riders at home and the relationship that they have with their work rider every given day is it's something special to behold.
Yeah, I just I didn't read it yet. I'm just looking through my emails this morning, and I just see the headline actually was some veterinary crowd, and they were saying about horses' heart rates being ridden by lady riders compared to men. And if I can find it here, does the sex of the jockey influence the racehorse's performance? And this is by a data, a science crowd that have heart monitored everything on the horses. And they've just written me an email, and I didn't go through it yet, but there are other people that think that as well. I found the headline fascinating. I'll read it later on.
Just watching some of the TG Carr documentaries on horse racing during lockdown, obviously the Dawn run comes to mind very much. If you could just explain to people, we have a lot of people listening in who maybe are not into racing or whatever. You obviously were born into a racing family. Your dad, Paddy, was basically a flag bearer, and he was a history maker rather. But what was it like growing up with your brothers and your dad and your mum?
Yeah, born on a horse's back is not what they say. Well, everything was about, I suppose, ponies and horses. We're lucky enough, lived out in the country, and couldn't wait to get your first pony. I think we had a donkey first. So we learned to ride on him, and then we got a pony, and then we got 2 ponies, and then we got, I think George got a pony, so that was 3 ponies, and then my cousins Ger and Seamus, that's Seamus Mullins, that's training in England, and Ger, who had the Ninga Gallops, and they had ponies. And so when we came home from school at 5 or 6 years of age, it was like getting out of the set of the Virginian or something like that. We just threw the school bags in the corner, tacked up the ponies, and headed off riding all around the area. You just rode into your neighbours' farms and to my uncle's farm. It was pure heaven sort of stuff. You'd never, when you think of, we just jumped out on the roads. That time, of course, you'd hear a lorry or a car coming for miles. There'd be no electric vehicles that time, or most of the cars wouldn't have exhaust on them, I'd say. But you could hear cars. So we never stopped and looked at anything. We just jumped from one field to the next, out across the road into the next field.
It sounds idyllic. Was it obvious at that stage that Tony was going to be the best rider among you?
No, he hadn't got a pony yet. No, then Tony came along, and he had a great pony called the Black Moth. So he went around the country doing a lot of show jumping, and so he was very good with her. I mean, they were a great pair. So they were.
It's down on the aforementioned Barbara White has sent me a list of notes here. Why did he decide to become a trainer? I think Willie considered racehorse management at one point. Now that was one I hadn't heard of. You might furnish me with some details there.
Yeah, I did. I think I went. I played for a racecourse, or I think Gordon hadn't a manager at the time. But anyway, I played, but I had no chance. But anyway, I just when I was growing up, you were hoping to make a living at something, and I hadn't a bit right. You're an amateur rider at home. You're not making any money, so I wondered, would I go off and learn about, working a stud? Would I work in? But anyway, between one thing and another, started riding winners, got more involved in racing. It was more fun than any of the rest, and I got involved in sort of helping my father, and then I went to Jim Bulger for a season, and then came home and then got married and had to really start making money. So I took out a license then, and that's where it started.
What was it like with Jim Bulger?
Different, totally different than coming from my father's place, which would be, farmer country background. And whereas Jim had different ideas. Jim was into making money, and it was about, he had jumpers at the time, but he wanted to get into 2-year-olds and flat horses. And, he had a different view on how to, how to make money, how to use money. I always think that Jim used every pound he got 4 times at least before he gave it to anyone, But, he had a much keener sense of making money than coming from my background.
And Gerard Gilroy's not with us today, but he was here briefly, and he asked me to ask you about your dad's gallops, because I kind of only vaguely remember the story myself. But did your father happen upon particular gallops rather by accident, in that the lads, I don't know, did you overwater or something? You might tell me what that was about.
No, we trained on my uncle's farm's fields. And like most trainers, and even some trainers do today, you train in the stubble fields, you'd open up a plough gallop in the summer. And that's all they have. No such thing as gallops. No one had gallops in the country. The first gallop that I remember ever hearing about, well, there was a tan gallop in the Curragh, and Seamus McGrath might have had a tan gallop. And that's, from what I can gather, is putting peat moss down on grass, and over a period of years, you keep raking it, the grass goes through it, and you have a nice gallop for flat horses. But it takes an awful lot of moving. Every time you gallop on it, you have to send 2 or 3 men back down to do it. But there's no such thing as an all weather that we have now. And then when Hurry Harriet won the Champion Stakes in 73, her owner was a Malcolm Thorpe, who was from Kilgraney, which was the next townland beside Kilcrut. All right, so we all know where Kilcrut is. That was my home place. And their neighbour was this man called Malcolm Thorpe, and he qualified the doctor, went to Canada, was very friendly with my mother and father over the years, and eventually got enough money to buy horses, sent them back to John. Yeah, we did just take that call. I'm not available at the moment. Thanks.
It's good you're giving us priority, Willie, anyway.
Yeah. Well, I have a fella working a new machine for me on the gallop, so he's probably just telling me it's either working or not working. But
timely gallops chat, anyway. Yeah.
There we were. So we put her in foal, and she went back to. He wanted all his stock to go back to Canada. He was retiring over there, and he wanted to bring his brood mares. He had about 4 or 5 brood mares. So they all had to go back to Canada. I said, could I go with them? And I did. And I remember taking off from Shannon on a DC-10. It was an extraordinary trip, great trip back then. So that would have been about 75. And I rode out with Mike Byrne, brother of Paddy Byrne, over in Tullow. And Mike was running a stud out there. Mike, I think, was chief steward in Canada. Eventually he was, but anyway, he ran this stud, and he had this little small gallop with a black surface. And we were riding the yearlings on it every day. And I didn't worry too much about the surface, but I knew it was an all-weather gallop, and it was small.
Yeah.
It was like a velodrome. It was 2 sides, and then the ends were cambered. We were only cantering on it. And then one morning, last morning, I decided to give this yearling a kick in the belly to see how fast he could go around the bend. And sure enough, it flew around the bend because of the camber.
Right.
And I can still hear the headman shouting at me because we were only supposed to do a slow hack, you know. But anyway, I wanted to test this thing because I'd never seen anything like it. So I came home, said it to my father. I think at the same time, Vincent O'Brien had put in a 9 furlong gallop, or maybe more, was it a 1.5 mile gallop down in Ballyboyle, and all weather. And that was the first all weather put in this country that I remember. And the cost of that all weather at the time was just way beyond any trainer in Ireland, I think. Maybe Seamus McGrath probably could have put one in, and probably did shortly after. But anyway, I said to my father, look, we can do this. And we didn't know what surface or anything to put in. But I said, this can be done if we just get the cambers right. And we put in a 2 furlong all-weather gallop. 2
furlong?
2 furlongs, yeah. And we had 4 paddocks out the back of our house. And I said, we just put it in there. I said to him, you know, we could do 80% of our steady work on it, and then you can bring them somewhere else to gallop. And we got in road making equipment, and we cut it out and put in the drainage. Everything was done properly. And then we put in, I think we put bark on it, yeah, which is extraordinary. You know, we didn't know. We were experimenting. We put the bark on it. Of course, the horses, we had it nicely cambered, but the horses still were sliding all over the place. So we added some sawdust, and that bound it together. And then it was still slippy, and it was too fast. It was riding too fast. So we put a rotavator on it and churned it up. And that was the start. And we just experimented ourselves, and we did a lot of steady work on it. And we used to bring our horses, you know, onto the grass or onto the stubble or the plough gallop for fast work. And eventually, after a few years, we got to know the gallop better, and a few of our own horses that we didn't think much of, we started doing faster work on the gallop, and we got to learn how to use it. Until at the end of the day, you know, Dawn Run was trained on it. She won her champion hurdle and her Gold Cup on it. You know, we got to know how to use it. It's a particular type of gallop, and I always say, you know, trainers come and look at my gallop, and they think, you know, they couldn't use that or they wouldn't use it. But to me, it's not about how good your gallop is, it's how good you can use your gallop. You got to know, you get to know your own gallop and learn how to use it. And that's more the key. The biggest lesson I ever got was when I went to Newmarket for the first time and saw the gallops in Newmarket, and I thought, great, you know, there's a lot of trainers here that can't gallop, and yet they have the best gallops in the world. You know, they're not successful. and yet have the best gallops in the world. So that told me it's not about having the best gallops in the world or what's perceived to be the best gallops in the world. I mean, I see gallops that we wouldn't use any, flat trainers might use them, but it's different surfaces suit different people and different types of horses.
I think your dad said that Hurry Harriet win was possibly either his best training achievement or his favourite win, but how would you describe your father?
Must have been very quiet, put up with me and Tony, and anyways, to name him two, but very quiet, very patient, never said an awful lot. And it's only when, as I grow older and get my own experience, you realise how patient he was. And you didn't know when you were growing up, people were telling you, I got a patience with horse, and you didn't know what it meant because you weren't alive long enough to know that actually patience takes years. When you're that age, you want things to happen in weeks and months rather than years. And it's it's just something you got to go through rather than the people telling you about it. You don't realize it, I think, until you get past a certain stage of your life, what it means.
It's not that you were an immediate success either necessarily at Cheltenham, in the sense of, it used to be every 3 winners every 2 years, give or take. And what has been that difference in the last sort of 20, 25 years or whatever since you started having Cheltenham winners?
I think investment in the yard with good owners. I think Richie coming into the yard was huge because he wasn't afraid to spend money on a few horses, and we started off with one or two, and the thing just got better and better. Most of the other times, we were going to the sales and buying horses, cheap horses, and that's what trainers did. And that art is gone out of training now because the point-to-point scene has sort of taken it over. But one time every trainer went to the sales and they bought everything you could afford, and you trained them for a bumper for the following season, and hopefully you sold one or two. It paid for all of the rest, and it's very hard for trainers now because the point guys have got in and sort of taken that market, and a lot of the horses go to a pointing yard instead of training yard.
Totally. And we brought in a recent feature, My Racing Moment, and compelled to ask you this. I have no idea what your answer will be, but what's the race in your career that gave you most joy, or that you look back on when you're on your deathbed, proverbial deathbed, and you look back on one race? What'll it be?
Oh God, I don't know. No, I've been lucky to have lots of races that, as a kid, I would have been delighted to win, like having the first winner in Cheltenham as a rider and as a trainer. I don't know. I mean, I suppose Hedgehunters National is probably as good.
Your father famously said he thought he was an even money shot on the day. Why was that day so special?
I don't know, but the way the horse had run the year before, and with his knowledge of the race, the horse's knowledge, and the fact that he was such a great jumper, and he still had a lovely weight, and his prep, everything had gone according to plan on the outside. Everything had gone according to plan. And, so from that position, you'd think if he got there in one piece, it was just a matter of getting around, but you never say that about the English National. But when we were the week before he ran, so the race on the Saturday, so the previous Saturday, do you remember Mia, who used to lead him up, and she used to ride him? And a girl from Finland, I just can't think of a second name now, but anyhow, we had a group of people on the gallop, and they happened to be booked in for a visit to the gallop for some reason that morning, and this was his final bit of work. And Mia rode him up the gallop, and I'm looking at this bit of work and I said, oh, holy Jesus, this is the slowest bit of work I've ever seen this horse do. And of course, she came back to me with all the people saying, well, Mia, how's that? And she, that's great, and passed on. So when the people were gone, I went over to Mia and said, Mia, was that as slow as it looked? She said it was. So obviously the horse is sick, and he just had a bit of a cold, a sort of a chest infection. So we were able to give him a couple of days of antibiotics, but basically rest him. I mean, he was fit as a flea. If you remember, Hedge Hunter, he was always probably the thinnest horse. He looked like a greyhound when he was fit. When he was right, he looked like he needed 3 months off in the field. But so we just walked him for the rest of the week. He went across to England. We just walked him and walked him and walked him. And I think the morning before the race, we gave him a canter for about 3 furlongs and a little blow for about a half a furlong, and the same the morning of the race. So basically, that's all he did for 1 week was two little canters, and pray that
it was
he was fit enough, and he put in a fantastic performance on the day. So. But you never know if nowadays. Could you imagine telling the press he's a slight lung infection, the national favourite, 7 days before the race, and that we're not going to exercise him before the race? What price would he be on the day of the race? And I couldn't tell anything. Couldn't tell Ruby. I didn't want Ruby to get off him. If I told Ruby, he might, remember Ruby the time would get offered maybe one of Paul Nicholls' horses to ride or something like that. So everything is quiet as everything. It's
simpler times.
Yeah. Yeah,
and it's funny because Honor Jameen obviously ended up being a big drifter before the festival this year, winning with his head in his chest. But just lastly on that Hedge Hunter bit, I'd say it gave your father a good kick that day as well.
I did, because he won 4 Irish Nationals. I often wondered to myself why he never won an Aintree National. And then, when I looked at it, and I said, he'd never had many runners in it. And so I made the decision that time that I was going to have runners. Anything that was qualified to run in the Aintree National was going to run in the Aintree National rather than in Fairyhouse. And that's what we did, and it ended up having the winner of it. So, and then we were lucky enough that we won the Irish National. So, we've evened that thing up. Like to win a few more Irish Nationals. I'd like to win a few more Aintree ones too, but we'll see. At least it's a box ticked anyway.
Yeah, my racing moment is brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Share every racing moment. Visit hri.ie or follow Horse Racing Ireland on social media. I was just making it up today, Willie. My first trip to the Curragh was in 2003, and Kevin Prendergast won the Park Express, and I was thinking this is a veteran trainer, so you've a long way to go yet, I think.
Ed Walsh said to me the other day, he said, I think your father won 10 champion trainer titles, and he hadn't won one by the time he was 65. So
wow.
I was looking, if it was a pedigree in horses, he was saying get better as they get older anyhow. So
yeah, I hope that's true for the entire family, including Tony and Tom. But I mentioned Honor Jameen there. You never won the champion chase before this year. That must have been special.
Yeah, it was good. It was great to tick it off. It was great to do it for a man like Tony Bloom. It was lovely to finally get that last whatever it was, the Cheltenham Key races, and yeah, good to do that.
The 4 big championship races. Was that the highlight of the week for you?
I mean, a fantastic highlight, but I enjoyed them all. I thought, the Friday was just something else, wasn't it? Allaho was very good, but the Friday was something else. And, I couldn't believe Patrick got not Statler, but Billaway back up. As much as I felt for David Christie, I thought it was some piece of horsemanship and jockeyship to get that horse up, who didn't want to know, didn't want to jump, didn't want to gallop. That's to me that was huge, anyhow.
Well, actually, Patrick had 3 winners during the week, and obviously that was one of the rides of the festival. But as a dad, that must have given you nearly as big a kick as anything.
Yeah, I think for an amateur to ride 3 winners at the festival in his career at the festival would be one thing, but to ride it in the 1 week, and but I would. The other side of that, I thought Jack and Poursois was going so well, and they just made that mistake, and that was the biggest disappointment of the week for me, to be honest. I just thought, wow, I think we had this horse in here in good order. It just didn't work out, and that was a huge disappointment. And that's, and then to have the other horse winning it, was sort of like chalk and cheese within 5 minutes.
We've time for a few questions on. I suppose we've time for a few questions on Cheltenham. Galloping Deschamps, obviously, with possibly the performance of the week from a horse who doesn't win. Where do we go from here? Are you still kind of keeping us all in this in the mystery of where this hugely promising horse is going to go next season?
Well, I mean, the obvious thing to do is go over 3 miles. I was and I can't say I was happy with the way he jumped for the first mile. Because he was just ballooning his fences, and he actually just lost so much ground. And that takes so much energy out of a horse. I was amazed that he was able to go away from Bob Olinger when Bob Olinger came to him. I thought he'd just fold and Bob Olinger would go on. I wonder is that true? Is Bob Olinger all right?
Yeah, I don't think he performed, in fairness, but would Galvin Deschamps be better off maybe among horses or held up, or his hurdle form, or what do you think?
Yeah, I'd say we mightn't do much different when we ride him again, but then there mightn't be the next time. There might be more runners and there might be more company, that sort of thing. It was uncharacteristic of him to do what he did. He mightn't do it again. And Paul, we haven't really got down to discussing it, but I said to him what I would have done or what on the day, and he can try that the next day. We'll see.
Beautiful. How good is Facile Vega?
I thought he was very good last year. This fly is annoying me.
It's not hurricane fly, is it?
And then it was here landing on my tee and landing on everything, but I'm trying to kill him here before. And yeah,
it's beautiful to see, irrespective of the outcome of the fly's well-being. It's beautiful to see something out of Quavega is so good.
Yeah, I mean he what he did in his 2 bumpers in Ireland, fantastic. To do what he did in the position he found himself in, going past the stands, and to me, I thought most horses do not come out of all that kickback on a day like that. Some horses just hate it and they pull up and they don't want to know. I mean, to me, look at Shishkin. Shishkin didn't want the rain even.
No.
Never mind kickback. Some horses don't like weather. And to come out of a field of all that kickback and produce the finish he did was just, I thought that the sign of a really, really extraordinary horse. And he showed me that the last time he was in Leopardstown, to beat a field of good horses by a length or so was good. But to zoom away from them in the straight the way he did when Patrick asked him to open up in Leopardstown, and to put in a good performance like that on that type of ground, and that ridiculous chicane job that they did over there. I mean, to me, unless they knew there was holes in the ground where the hurdles were, aren't jockeys used to riding in soft ground? As Danny said, what would they do if the ground was really heavy? It was
totally.
Yeah, I thought it was a bit over the top, but at least they ran the thing and didn't call it off.
Yeah, I think we're more accustomed to weather maybe over here. I think you run Mercury on Sunday as well, another bumper horse who I think a lot of people are excited by next season.
Yeah, he's a fine type, and he did it well in Gorn, wasn't he? Won. So he looks one for the future, I think.
You heard it here first, not from Willie Mullins, but from me. Mercury to win the Supreme next year, and Facile Vega to win the Ballymore. What can possibly go wrong? Willie, you did have Sir Gerhard win the Ballymore. This horse just has so much class.
Yeah, got his jumping together, didn't he, the other day? You know, he was brilliant the first day in Leopardstown, brilliant the other day. I don't know what happened the second day, but I think he just got upset. And Paul hit him a slap to straighten him out, and I think that upset him more. So, yeah, he's a nice type.
You go chasing next season, do you think, or is it up in the air?
That's the obvious thing. To me, I wonder, should he go for the champion hurdle, you know? So
You've appreciated as well, obviously, in the mix.
Well, he'll go chasing next year.
Jumps like one, doesn't he?
Well, he looks like one.
Yeah.
You know, you see, it's a big, heavy unit of a horse, and you know, we didn't get anything like the performance we got last year from him in the Supreme Novice, and so we've got to sort that out as well.
We're nearly out of time. I hope those people pinging you messages are wondering about continuing on the party into the week. But if you were to continue the party in terms of the British Trainers Championship, it's obviously been mooted this week in the Racing Post. It is a realistic possibility, is it?
I think you'd probably have to win the
National anyway.
National, yeah, for starters. You know, Paul Nicholas has kept a fresh team. Didn't send a lot of them to Cheltenham. I'm sure Nicky has a few lying around as well in wait to get, you know, for starters, we'd have to win 500,000 without a reply. That's very hard to do, isn't it?
It is, but yeah, the month you've had, you never know. But just lastly, it must have been, I wasn't over there, but it must have been fantastic to witness what it meant to the people again to be back at Cheltenham.
Oh yeah, everyone was bursting to go to Cheltenham. I mean, you know, you could sense it. Talking to people, I went over on the Sunday, and everyone just wanted to get in the door. And as the week went on, the more people that were coming, and the atmosphere around the ordinary bars and that was just buzzing all the time. You know, people really, really wanted to get out and about and enjoy good horse racing.
I suppose the final, yeah,
spectacular racing, I think.
Spectacular racing, and the final question: we saw Holly Doyle and Tom Marquand tied the knot. Is there any hope of your son ever marrying into racing royalty as well?
Boy, anyhow, I'm keeping out of that. I'm probably the last one to know, so I'll keep away from all that. Anyway.
There we go. You're short of words first time today, Willie. It's been brilliant having you on, and dare I say, enjoy the rest of the week.
Thanks very much, and likewise, Johnny. Have a good weekend.
That is the great Willie Mullins, son of the great Paddy Mullins and dad of the great Patrick Mullins. We must get on the show as well. We had him on last Friday. He kind of had to rush off. I think the stewards wanted him for something or other. They're probably wondering how we didn't have more than the three winners on the week. An amazing ride on Billaway, which preceded our interview, as you may remember. It is time to go to the ads shortly, but before that, just want to tell you about a huge event we've got coming up. Join us and the Ferryhouse Racecourse celebrate the 150th running of the Boyle Sports Irish Grand National at a special OTB Roadshow in Dunboyne Castle House, Castle Hotel and Spa on Monday, April 4th. Irish Grand National winners Nina and Paul Carberry, Noel Meade, Robert Power, Arthur Moore and many more racing guests will look back at Ireland's most famous racing memories and stories that the race has produced over its amazing history over a century and a half. See otbsports.com and our social channels to register.
Friday Night Racing
on Off the Ball.
Brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. Visit hri.ie. Friday Night Racing
on Off the Ball.
Brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. Visit hri.ie.
Yeah, and we do apologise that we didn't have far longer. Like, we're talking 3 or 4 hours with Willie Mullins, to talk about his career, and hopefully we'll have him back sooner or later to talk about his days in racing. What a Cheltenham he had, 10 winners. But the beauty of this time of year is you go out of Cheltenham and straight into the flat, and the first 2-year-old maiden of the season at the Curragh tomorrow. So it's just a special time to be a racing fan. And the flat season's obviously back at the Curragh tomorrow, but also next Sunday. And I spoke to Colin Keane, Siobhan Rutledge and Ronan Whelan, who I thought was absolutely brilliant in terms of his own battles in the saddle. I spoke to him earlier this week. It's well worth a watch. You can see it on the Off the Ball social channels. We basically spoke in one of the new kind of I suppose restaurant areas at the Curragh, which looked absolutely spectacular, I have to say, on the day, and really hope people get back to support the Curragh this year. And here is Colin Keane talking about the atmosphere of racing at the flat quarters of racing in Ireland. What's it like to ride here, actually?
Yeah, it's one of the best. It's one of the best tracks in Ireland, if not the world. It's 9 times out of 10 the best horse will win. It's very, very rarely you get a hard luck story around here.
What was it like having Racehorse back as well? I'm sure it makes a massive difference just for the atmosphere and that joy coming into the parade ring. We spoke with the day Pat Mullins had his fundraiser here, but atmospheres like that are special.
Yeah, I haven't witnessed an atmosphere like that, especially when they all came back down to greet the horses in from the race. That was unbelievable, and it was a miserable day as well, so the fact that everyone came out to see that. But days like that I think are few and far between. But no, it's great to have people back racing because it brings a bit of atmosphere. It's very quiet when it's during COVID.
Yeah, the brilliant C.T. Keane champion rider, he's back riding at the Curragh tomorrow, and indeed, obviously, a long odds-on favourite to be champion jockey again this season. Getting back to Cheltenham, though, no less than 6 winners for me, Johnny, that is in brackets, in the 10th follow, laughing at my own jokes, in the 10th follow stable. That brings my points tally up from 371 to 644, which puts me rank, I think, 1713 in the overall standings. One of those winners, Flooring Porter, was ridden to victory by my fellow 10th follow competitor, Danny Mullins. What a ride, first of all, and what an appraisal of the ride Ruby Walsh gave on TV. I just thought it was gripping stuff. Unbelievable ride from Danny, unbelievable celebrations afterwards with James Cahill and the lads. But despite all of that, anyway, Danny remains 100 points behind me in second place. Meanwhile, Ger looks nailed on for a bronze medal, as he has pretty much all season, to be fair. It's a busy weekend for the Tote, with flat seas returning at the Curragh and Naas. Sunday sees the Tote sponsored. Tote Always SP or better handicap steeplechase taking place at Limerick. So there is racing as well, obviously, on in the jump scene at Limerick this weekend. But it's all about, I suppose, for some in the Kildare region anyway, the flat returning at the Curragh and Naas. The beautiful 2-year-old flat maiden of the season, where you get new horses who've never run before, new stallions never represented before, and the dream is alive for everyone, including Jim Bulger, who has a daughter of Finchkill Bio by none other than Kingman. Friday Night Racing on Off the Ball is brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. Visit hri.ie. Have a good weekend.
Friday Night Racing
on Off the Ball.
Brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. Visit hri.ie.